2017?
I believe so, yes.
If you could turn to page 439.
Feel like you live a lot of your life online? The average person is connected almost 7 hours a day.
You're there?
I'm here.
And so 2017 is about a year or so into the App Store Improvements Program.
Yes.
And on this slide, DX4399.064, there's a reference to 400,000 plus apps removed, right?
That's right.
And that's removed pursuant to the App Store Improvement Program.
That's right.
And so already 1 year in, Apple had removed 400,000 or more apps as part of the App Store Improvement Program.
Yes.
And those were all apps that had made it through app review and were currently on the App Store.
Yes.
Presented a demonstrative during the council's questioning that showed the portion of 2020 app submissions that have been approved and rejected. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay, can we please put the slide 13 from council's presentation up on the screen, please? This is demo 13. That's right, Your Honor. And this is the slide we were just talking about?
Yes.
I take it you don't want 4399 in evidence? No, Your Honor. Okay. The information on this slide is suggesting that for the 2020 app submissions, 40% were rejected, right?
Yes.
And you gave an estimate of overall that was about 2 million apps rejected?
Yes.
Your Honor, I received a note that I would indeed like to admit DX4399 into evidence. Okay. No objection. No objection. 4399 submitted. Thank you, Your Honor. And so what I didn't think you gave us was the overall number of submissions for 2020. Do you have that?
Not off the top of my head.
So you know the number of rejections, but you don't know the number of approvals or overall submissions?
No, I have a range.
Okay, is it around the average of 4.9 million along the lines of the last 3 years before?
No, I think we were up to over 7 million.
Over 7 million. So 2 million, is that 40% of 7 million?
So in the case of the large sum, an app would be, if it was submitted multiple times, let's say it was submitted this week, and they failed to resolve the issue, submitted again a month later, and they were continuing, that would be multiple rejections.
And multiple submissions?
Multiple submissions, yes.
Okay. So again, we have 2 million rejections for one time and multiple submissions included, right?
Yeah, but also on the second half of that 2 million, the 1 million for updates, that also would have been apps that were live on the store.
All I'm trying to figure out is just the math. You said that 2 million total apps went through app review in 2020 and got a rejection X next to it, right?
Yes, but the updates that were rejected, that may not have been a submission to app review, that may have been a live app. So it would not have been reflected in the 100,000 per week submissions that we get. So,
in other words, they are or they are not in the 40%?
I think we would have to look at those 2 million differently because it's including re-review tasks that would not be in the overall 7 million submission number.
So if you look at the overall submission number, the number of rejections is much lower than 40%.
No, I don't believe it is.
What do you believe it is?
I believe that the number of submissions that we get per week and the number of rejections that we get per week, if you look at that average, it's 40% for 2020. I think that the 2 million that I was referencing earlier, 1 million of that was new submissions, and another million of that was a culmination of both updates that were submitted, but also live apps that we discovered through our automation or social listening, escalations, etc., and that would not have counted as a submission in that weekly submission number. It also would not have counted as a submission in the approximately 7 million I quoted earlier.
Okay. So I'm still, and this could be my fault, I'm not getting the numbers. So what is different about what you're counting in the 7 million number and what you're including in the 40%?
My apologies. When an app is submitted for review, and we get on that slides we looked at earlier, the statistics, there's roughly 100,000 iOS submissions per week. There's roughly a 40% rejection rate for those submissions. Of the total actions that we took in 2020, some of those actions were on a submission, and some of those actions were as a result of us finding an issue with a live app. And so I don't believe we can take at least one of that million and use it as a way to determine whether the 40% is accurate or not. There's separate numbers for separate things. Okay,
so I should completely ignore that discussion about what that other million was. So now I just want to talk about what the 40% is here on this slide.
Yeah, let's talk about the 40%.
Okay, let's talk about that. What are you saying is included in the 40%?
This summary was based on all of the apps submitted to app review in 2020 thus far, and the percentage of that was rejected.
And you're saying that, so if I do the math, it's about 2.8 million?
I'm not sure you get the math.
Doing 40% of 7 million.
That sounds about right.
So there's more complicated math that I'm going to now have to do in my head, but let's try. So you're not saying, of course, on this slide that the 215,000 rejections for privacy guideline violations explains the 40%, right?
No, this is an example of things that would have been in the 40%.
Okay, so the privacy guideline violations there are a subset of the red 40% of rejections.
That's right.
And so we're talking about 215,000 out of 7 million apps submitted were rejected for privacy guideline violations?
Roughly.
2 to 3% overall?
Sounds right.
Let's just talk about the privacy guideline violations a little bit further. So that guideline violation, I think you talked about on your testimony with the council, was referring to section 5.1 of the guidelines. Is that right?
I believe so.
If you could turn to PX 56 in evidence. And you have about 2 minutes. Thank you.
Let's see the guideline.
Turn to PX 56.19.
Okay.
And there you find guideline 5.1 on privacy, right?
Yes.
Okay. And everything underneath 5.1 constitutes a privacy guideline?
Yes.
including 5.1.1 on data collection and storage, right? And Laminate 1 underneath that is called privacy policy, right?
Yes.
It says that all apps must include a link to their privacy policy in the App Store Connect metadata field and within the app in an easily accessible manner, correct?
Correct.
And it goes on to say what that information has to provide, right?
That's right.
So an app can be rejected based on its failure to include that link to their privacy policy, right?
Yes.
They might have the policy, they just omitted the link.
The link now is not possible to be omitted because this is something that is checked at the submission process.
Okay, but that has not always been the case, right?
That's right.
Okay, and so before it was the case, apps could have been rejected for just failing to include the link, right?
That's right.
And that would have been a privacy violation.
Yes.
And you can't tell us in any given year in any of these data that you've looked at what proportion of the privacy guideline violations are for that individual guideline.
That number?
Okay. It's a breaking point, Your Honor. All right, let's go and recess then for 20 minutes. Thank you. Oh, and before I go, Ms. Forrest, I did, when you were not here, compliment your leadership and that of opposing counsel and your clients for the diversity that I've seen on these teams. It's much appreciated. Okay, everyone. Just want to see what binding he is up here. I'm going to go to the room if you want to come. I can. I can see the state. But I figured it might be. Sure, of course. It's CRMG. Okay, so I'll email you. Okay, sure. Yep.
Submitting out.
Thank you very much. All right.
I'm going to try to speak more slowly. Okay.
Okay, we are back on the record. We're back on the record. The record will reflect that the parties are present, the witnesses on the stand. You may proceed.
Mr. Kuzminka, you talked earlier about SLAs. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And that refers to the length of time that your processes for app review would take place?
It refers to what a developer should expect with respect to how long an app will go through review.
If you could please turn to PX442 for identification.
That's it?
This is an email from you to Sean Fruden and others on February 14, 2018, correct?
Yes.
And this is an email discussing the anticipated release of Fortnite on iOS.
Yes.
Your Honor, I offer PX442 into evidence.
Any objection? No objection. Admitted.
On page 442.2, in the second page there's some challenges discussed, right?
Yes.
And one of them, if you go to the end of item 1, it says, with the recent content update cadence, getting stuck in app review is their single biggest concern/risk, right?
I see this, yes.
And that's discussing the fact that because Fortnite is a multi-platform app that releases content on a very frequent basis, that it really needs to understand what the cadence is going to be for app review at Apple, right?
Yes.
And there's discussion in here that even with a 48-hour SLA, the app review process would be a bottleneck for their entire ecosystem of updates, right? You can put that aside and please turn to PX446 for identification, please.
Yes.
Have you ever seen this email before?
You can include it earlier in the thread.
And it refers to discussions that you had with these individuals, right?
Yes.
And on the first page, there's a reference to a 3-day meeting with you, right?
Yes.
And there's a discussion again here about not wanting iOS to be the bottleneck for cross-platform developers, but the reality of the situation is we sometimes are that bottleneck, right?
That's what is wrote here, looking off the thread.
And it says, continues on, given the exchange with Tristan and others on this topic, there really isn't anything we can do to change that, right?
That's what's written here?
Your Honor, I offer PX446 into evidence.
Any objection? No objection, Your Honor. Submitted.
Thank you. During app review, that we've discussed at some length, Apple tries to screen for apps that attempt to scam users, right? Another word for that type of app might be fraudulent app.
Yeah.
Fraudulent apps do make it through app review, correct?
It makes mistakes.
Fraudulent apps do make their way through app review, right?
Yes.
You were shown on your direct testimony from your counsel PX335. Do you recall that, and would you please turn to it? It's likely in the other binder.
Yes.
Okay, if you could please turn to page 335.6, which is the same page, one of the same pages your counsel showed you.
Yes.
This is the goals slide.
Yes.
And the first item, Your Honor, do you need a moment? Thank you. The first item says reduce number of manual reviews. Do you see that?
Yes.
I just want to understand, because I don't think you talked about this. Does that mean that there is an effort or a goal to try to move some types of apps into fully automated review?
No.
What is that referring to?
So all apps go through the same review. What this is referring to is if we can front load a issue to a developer's attention and it doesn't require the human being to do this, so benefits to the privacy policy example is a good one, where the machines take care of that initial look for app review.
So not that you would take the full process and automate it for any apps, but take some aspects of the process that were currently human and see if you can automate it.
Yes, but some apps would not make it to human review if they had issues detected.
Understood. I'm just trying to understand what that phrase means. And you're saying that some aspects that were currently human aspects of the review would be changed to an automated, machine-led review.
Change or enhance?
To an automated review.
Yes.
The second item is reduce developer perceived review time, right?
Yes.
And again, this is reference to the fact that developers perceive the review time as too long, right?
Yes.
The third item is improved consistency. Do you see that?
Yes.
And that goes both directions, right? Apps that make it through that shouldn't have, and apps that were rejected that should have been approved.
Yes.
What your counsel did not go through, I don't think, are there some notes below the slide, right? Speaker notes?
I see them, yes.
Okay. And it says map note, quote, ton of scam apps in store. Do you see that?
I do.
If you turn, please, to PX335.8, 2 pages later.
I see this, yes.
This is the top 10 rejection reasons, right?
Yes.
Guideline 5.1, or privacy, is not on here, right?
The guidelines changed. There is a privacy guideline here, but not 5.1 specifically.
And which one?
17.2.
And that's 2%?
Is that way, yes?
And that's in line with what we talked about earlier? about your demonstrative slide 13.
Sounds right, yes.
If you turn to 335.20.
Can you repeat the number, sorry?
Sure, it's the .20. So reference ending 138 if you're looking at the base number.
And that's better because our copies don't have that dot reference.
Ah. Yes, ending 138.
Yes.
You look at the speaker notes again there, sir, you see a ton of scam apps in store, correct?
I do?
If you turn to the base number ending 174, which also, for the record, is 335.56.
Can you repeat the, sorry?
Absolutely. It's the base ending 174.
Base is the reference to the number on a document.
Thank you.
I have that quote for jurors.
They haven't been deposed, though.
I see this, yeah.
Okay. This is talking about the potential acquisition of Source DNA, right?
That's right.
And that's the company you actually did acquire, right?
Apple did acquire Source DNA.
And you were also, if you look at the next page, also considering at the time potentially acquiring Authority, right?
Yes.
And that's another company that offers dynamic and static analysis tools.
Yes.
Your Honor, I offer PX 335 into evidence.
It's already in.
Is it? No, apologies. Thank you. If you could please turn to PX 2084.
I see the document.
Thank you. This is an email you received on October 29, 2019, correct? And in 2019, do you recall becoming aware that Wandera, Wandera, a security firm, identified 17 apps that load a malicious clicker Trojan model on an iOS device?
See the article, yes?
Do you recall becoming aware that the Wandera firm had identified 17 apps with a malicious clicker Trojan module?
I do not.
Your team investigated the issue, right?
Yes.
And these apps did in fact contain malicious clicker Trojan modules, right?
Yes.
And a malicious clicker Trojan module means that the app was carrying out ad fraud related tasks in the background of the app, like continuously opening web pages or clicking links without a user interaction, right?
not sure if the app would be in the background, but the activity would have been in the background of the app usage.
Meaning the activity of opening, clicking on ads, opening pages, that was happening without the user doing anything.
Correct.
And in addition to doing those activities, those types of apps can also potentially steal information of users, right?
Potentially.
Just if you could turn to page 2084.4, that has a list of the infected apps that Wandera identified. Let me know when you're there.
See the apps?
Okay. Do you see the second one there called
This portion is hearsay in the document?
I could not hear you.
Objection, this portion is hearsay in the document that she's directing the witness to.
Oh, she's asking a question. Overruled.
You see the second app there is EMI Calculator and Loan Planner?
I do.
So let's now go back to the first page, 2084.1. There's an email from you on the bottom of that page. Do you see that? And you are discussing in that email the EMI Calculator and Loan Planner app, right?
Yes.
And you say, weird one, looks like we took it down, it came back to review, two folks ignored the notes, not hard to do that, and approved the app, correct? And that there's a reference to the ARC group being involved?
Yes.
And that's that same group that used to be called UTB, right?
Yes.
And so you concluded, going back down the same page, after you identify what I just read, you say, quote, we are making critical errors. Do you see that?
Yes.
Your Honor, I offer into evidence PX 2084.
No objection?
Only objection to the hearsay portion, Your Honor.
Okay, so we have a standing note. Do you want to say that every single time, or will you all just, or can I have a standing order that when there is hearsay from a third party in these documents, when I go back to review them and consider them in the context of this case, I will consider them for their proper evidentiary purpose?
Yes, Your Honor.
That is acceptable, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, standing objection on both sides and a standing response. It's admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. You're also aware, are you not, that certain apps on the App Store have scammed users into purchasing subscriptions?
Yes, I'm aware of subscription scams.
And you're aware of subscription scams that, in fact, make their way through app review, get approved, and get onto the App Store, right?
I'm aware of those mistakes, yes.
You've described the fact that such apps make it past app review as, quote, shocking, right?
Yes.
If you could please turn to PX 2029 for identification.
See the document?
This is an email on the top from you on January 18, 2018, right?
That's right.
And the earliest email is from a non-Apple individual alerting Apple to what they described as a serious scam that is being perpetrated through the Apple App Store, right?
Yes.
And prior to receiving this email, you were not aware of the scam, right?
I'm not aware of this email prior to receiving it.
Are you aware of the scam? Do you recall being aware of the scam before receiving this email?
I don't have recollection of these apps before this email.
And he attaches a PDF that describes in detail how he thinks the scam operates.
Yes.
And you reviewed that PDF slide deck, right?
I believe so.
And in fact, you wrote that the contents of the PDF was shocking, right?
Yes.
And you also wrote, we need to think about how to stop this from happening, right?
Yes.
And stop this means stop apps from scamming users and making hundreds of thousands of dollars through these scams, right?
Stop apps from scamming users. Yes, I'm not aware of how much this app made.
It made money.
I'm not sure.
You have no understanding whatsoever as to whether it made any money.
I don't recall.
Are you aware of instances of scams that are not making money?
Yes.
On app store removals for scams, have you been removing them for doing other things?
Attempting to scam a user.
Okay, and to make money off of those users or to steal their data or something else?
All of the above. I think I'm making this distinction between whether this scam was successful or not and actually did make money.
Okay, so what you're just saying here is whether or not they were attempting to make money, you just don't know one way or the other.
I don't know how successful their scam was.
Your Honor, I offer PX 2029 into evidence.
No objection. No objection.
Submitted. Thank you. After this email, subscription scams continue to make their way onto the App Store to this day, right?
We still find apps in the review process and apps that have got through the review process that attempt to manipulate and scam customers.
And that's true today.
Yes.
You could also turn your binder to PX 372.
See the document?
That's an email you received on March 7, 2019.
Yes.
And this is another report from a customer into Apple that's discussed and circulated within Apple, right?
Discussed and sent to the ARC team for investigation.
And the user complaint is detailing a scam where the app darkens the screen's brightness to 0 so that you can't read anything, and then an in-app notification to purchase premium membership appears for the low price of $89.99.
Yes.
And that is a charge that went through IAP, right?
I believe so.
And the email from your colleague to you and to the ARC team says, can you please jump on this? It looks like this could be another Touch ID scam, right?
That's right.
Your Honor, I offer PX 372 into evidence.
No objection. No objection.
Submitted. Thank you, Your Honor. If you could please turn to PX 371 in your binder.
I have the document.
This is an email chain from February 6, 2019, in which you participated, right?
Yes.
And the email in the middle of the page is an email from a developer. Do you see that?
I do.
And he's writing to Tim Cook and some others about a highly dangerous app that can lead users with high blood pressure to believing that the blood pressure readings are accurate, right?
Can you repeat the document number? My apologies, I think I have the wrong one here.
Oh, yeah, I don't have that one.
371, okay. Let's see. It may be in that thin binder from yesterday. That might be part of the problem, and we didn't make its way in. I'll move on, and we'll see if we can find it. Do you have PX364 in your binder? This will be PX bingo until we can get one.
So I do have 371 from yesterday.
Okay. Now I may approach the witness with it?
No.
Thank you.
We're going to go back to 371.
I will do that, Your Honor. Mr. Koznick, do you have PX 371?
I do see it, yes.
Thank you. And I was pointing to the middle of the page, an email from a developer. Do you see that?
Yes.
The subject line is fraudulent and life-threatening app.
You see this? Yes.
And the developer is complaining that this is an app that could mislead users about their blood pressure.
That's right.
And Mr. Schiller forwards that email on to you, right?
Yes.
And you report back.
I report back that the app is removed, yes.
You say it was removed, but you go on to say that there was no evidence of fraudulent IAP. The IAP was set up to remove ads and was clear to customers what they were getting, right?
That's right.
Okay. So that sentence is saying that they were not violating a number of guidelines, right?
There's some guidelines that are not violated, correct?
I didn't hear you.
Sorry, Your Honor. There was guidelines they were not violating.
But you went on to say the app is still nonsense and should not be on the store, right?
That's right.
What guideline is that a reference to?
I think what I would have been referring to here is that the app promises functionality that's not actually possible on our devices with accuracy. And so in that case, and now we actually have a guideline specifically that calls out blood pressure monitoring with out specific hardware as something that would be a violation.
And this app made its way through app review, right?
That's right.
Now let's go to PX 364, please, in your binder.
371. No objection? No objection. 371 submitted.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, next.
364, Your Honor.
Okay, so I don't have it in today's binder. Was it in, I'll check yesterday's. Yes, it was in yesterday's as well.
So that thin binder I handed you should have it. Apologies.
Thank you.
Thought we moved them over. 364, sir.
Let's see the document.
Thank you. And you recall during your prior testimony with your counsel talking about Headspace and copycat apps and that stuff?
I do.
And this email is, in fact, an email involving Headspace, right?
Yes.
And this email, the top of which is from you on November 30th, 2016.
That's right.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm going to go ahead and, before I forget, offer PX 364 into evidence.
No objection?
No objection.
Admitted.
Thank you. So in 2016, you spoke with the CEO of Headspace, right?
Yes.
And Headspace is an app on iOS?
Yes.
And you spoke with him after he had informed Apple that his app was, quote, suffering from repeated egregious theft of the app's IP in the Apple App Store, right?
Yes.
And those are copycat apps, right?
Yes.
And he told your team that consumers were leaving negative comments on the app's social channels because of those copycat apps.
Yes.
And those copycat apps were approved by App Review, right?
Yes.
So I just want to understand, is a copycat app only a problem if it's copying an app that's currently on the iOS App Store?
No.
So if a company that doesn't have an app on iOS finds a copycat of their business on iOS, they can call up Apple and complain?
They can go through a disputes process.
All right, so for Fortnite, for example, if you find a copycat app of Fortnite, even though Fortnite is not on iOS, that would be grounds to remove that app?
We would try to. We don't want customers to be confused with a developer impersonating another developer, period.
And at the app review stage, reviewers are supposed to be on the lookout for copycat apps, right?
Reviewers and tools.
And they're comparing not only reviewers and tools. And with respect to the app review process, human reviewers are familiar with the apps that are on iOS. Is that how they're doing it?
Generally, there's a lot of apps, so they're certainly not familiar with all of the apps, but the tools help support them.
And so would you be upset to learn that there were copycat apps of Fortnite on iOS App Store currently?
Yeah, we investigate those.
Okay. So if I told you that something called Battle Survival was on the App Store, you'd send your team to investigate it?
If you, like any developer, report that there's an issue with an app, we will send a request to the ARC team to investigate and ensure that the app's compliant with our rules.
Or did I just throw Battle Survival under the bus?
Maybe did.
Apple talks about protecting privacy, and we've spent some time on that today, right? That's guideline 5.1.
So one of our privacy temples, yes.
And we've discussed that there have been rejections for privacy violations, right?
Yes.
And likewise, there have been approvals for apps that have gotten through that violate privacy guidelines.
Yes, we make mistakes.
And you make mistakes on privacy.
We make, yeah, absolutely. We make mistakes across all of the platforms.
Please turn to PX 365.
So 365, well, it's in both binders.
Okay. One of them made their way over. Your choice. Small or big binder, I think.
Okay. I believe I see 365.
Great. This is an email chain from March 6, 2018, in which you participated, sir?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move PX 365 into evidence.
No objection?
No objection.
Admitted.
Let's please go to the email from March 5th from Mr. Schiller in the middle of the first page, please.
It's you?
He is forwarding on an article from the Wall Street Journal, right?
Yes.
The title of that is Your Location Data is Being Sold Often Without Your Knowledge, right?
Correct.
And Mr. Schiller says, there appears to be rampant use of location data based on SDKs that slurp it up after a user approves far beyond what people think they are allowing just for the app experiences they expect. You see that?
Yes.
Ask you to look into it,
Correct.
and you say you will.
Yes.
Those apps that are being reported in this article were approved by App Review, right?
Yes.
You talked about reviewing for objectionable content in your testimony with your counsel. Do you recall that?
I do.
So, objectionable content, you gave some examples.
Yes.
We're not going to go back through those. We'll talk about some others. But objectionable content can refer to being defamatory, discriminatory, or mean-spirited.
Yes.
It could also refer to depictions that encourage illegal or reckless use of weapons and dangerous objects.
Yes.
But apps with defamatory, discriminatory, or mean-spirited content make it through App Review, right?
Yes, there's mistakes in that guideline as well.
And so do apps get through with depictions that encourage illegal or reckless use of weapons and dangerous objects, right?
I imagine there's been some that have gotten through for that.
And you talked about how human review is an important part of the objectionable content review, right?
Yes.
But again, even with that human review, a number of offensive apps do get through App Review and get approved, right?
Yes.
If you could please turn to PX 131 in evidence.
So it's not in evidence yet.
I believe it is, Your Honor.
131, wrong page. Yes.
Thank you. Is this part of that original stipulation of both?
Yeah, I have 131 in evidence. Is it in this binder?
It is.
I have the document.
So Ms. Stone, I'll admit it again for your notes.
In the bottom email, this is an email. Do you have a redacted copy in front of you, Mr. Kuzminko?
I do not.
You see names?
I do.
Okay, can you just please be careful not to speak them? We're not going to be saying
Thank
anything.
you. Yes.
Thank you. This is an email from a 14-year-old app developer.
That's what the email says, yes.
Thank you. And he is reporting about having had to endure the terrible school shooting in Parkland.
Yes.
And he was saying that he had just written an app and had been rejected because he didn't do the right sign-in mechanism, right?
Yes.
But he reports that to Apple, excuse me, not to you, to Mr. Cook at Apple, that there's a school shooting game on the App Store getting reviews like the best school shooting game by far, #KillKids, right?
That was one of their user reviews.
And on the page ending 131.2, Mr. Cook forwards this email to Mr. Schiller, who then forwards it to you, among others, right?
Yes.
And you asked your team to investigate how this got in, right?
Yes.
Meaning, how could it be possible that a school shooting app made its way through the automated and human review of App Review and got posted to the App Store, right?
And I think what I said in the email was dumbfounded
Indeed.
at how this could be missed.
Indeed. You say, I'm dumbfounded with how this could be missed, right?
Right.
How it could be missed through all the procedures in place within the App Review process, including human beings, looking at the app, saying, I approve this, and it gets posted to the App Store, right?
Yes.
After that, even in the past year, Apple's approved other apps that make games out of mass shootings, right?
I'm not familiar with any others.
Let's look at PX2371, please.
Okay, that's in yesterday's binder.
Thank you.
I believe I have the document.
Thank you. This is an email chain from June 9th, 2020,
Yes.
and you participated in this email chain?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move PX2371 into evidence.
No objection.
No objection.
Admitted. 2371.
Thank you. This is always the first email in the chain. And again, if you're not looking at a redacted copy, we'll just not mention any names, please, sir. You see where I am?
I do.
Thank you. This is an email sent to Mr. Cook about an app that was on the App Store as of June 8, 2020, right?
Yes.
And the email indicates that the entire premise of the app is shooting cannons at protesters, right?
Yes.
The writer of the email, I think we can agree, correctly observed that this was very insensitive and tone deaf in light of current events, right?
That's right.
Mr. Schiller forwards that email to you and others asking WTF, right?
Yes.
And I think we can all agree what that means without uttering those words.